now, now we are live, but we are waiting to see if this goes on LinkedIn also.
How many of these have you done now?
How many?
Yeah, of these have you done now?
I think it's 15. Okay, now something is coming out to LinkedIn. I sit here. So let's go live on LinkedIn too.
Good old technology.
Okay, okay, now we're live. Hi, Martin again.
Hey, Roberto. Thanks for
Hello,
having me.
everyone. Hi to also to the people who is going to be to connect. And actually, if you are already connected, now we have this screen at this moment we are monitoring. I will close it. But if you are already connected, just maybe say something into the chat, say hi, so we know you're there. And we are not going to check the chat in the first part of the conversation, but then in the middle, we are going to see if you have any question. And of course, we invite you to ask question if you have something for Martin, if something that we talk about makes you wonder or have any doubt, we are very happy to see what's there. And thank you so much, Martin, for doing this with me. I'm very excited about doing this live. We have been talking about this for many months, and
Mhm.
actually, and time flies. And yeah, and I also remember how we connected thanks to another person in the community who's just sent a message here. Hi, Lionel, by the way. And I want to thank you for being here, for taking this time, for blocking this space, and also thank the people who is connected now and who is also investing 1 hour of their time, which is our most valuable thing, and we're never going to get back. So we hope it's worth. And now I'm going to close everything and just be here. And my first question, Martin, for you would be, what's your story? What made you uh, go and take the decision to work into the space of mental health with companies? I'm very curious.
Yeah, I mean, like anything, I guess. Yeah, the best answer is it's complicated.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I was one of the early employees at the industry consortium that created the smartphone industry. That British industry consortium, it should be said. Today, everyone thinks it's all Californian, but the Brits led the charge way back when. And then I went on to help Skype disintermediate global telecoms. But I know a few years ago I went into my cave. I was really struggling with depression and what I now know as PTSD, as a result of the childhood trauma of seeing my mum being sectioned when I was a kid. And it's something I'd always lived with, but hadn't found the, I don't know, the medium to do something about it. And when I came out of my cave sort therapy, also a little bit later than that, my wife, or now wife, struggled with burnout
Mm.
at a time when all she needed was just the ability to work from 1 day a week, to work from home for 1 day a week. But it was pre-pandemic. Everyone was like, no, you ought to be bums on seats. So a few kind of serendipitous things happened. I had a great conversation with a lady in Geneva who was an occupational health psychologist who had measured well-being for the UN and for the International Red Cross globally. So doing studies of measuring well-being for 40,000 people. And so it was a few factors all kind of
Yeah.
combined. I realized I was bored of tech, wasn't enjoying it anymore. And I came up, there was a phrase that was bouncing around my head at the time that there has to be more to life than firing angry birds at pigs. And as I said, a few things happened, a few life events happened, and that kind of led to me going all in on mental health.
Mm. And there's one thing that when you say the story, you talk about measurement. And this is something that you very much stress, numbers and statistics, but at the same time you do it in a like warm way. So what's some statistic or something that we would never think this is real, and in the other side, yes, it is.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. I mean, I call it, yeah, the story behind the data.
Yeah,
And I'd like to say there was some magic and some comms and stuff behind it, but it was just one of these days when I was building my website and working with copywriter, bouncing some ideas back and forth. This kind of thing, phrase just kind of fell into our lap because we talk so much about mental health and well-being, and we use data now in so many facets of our lives. But seeing how many kilometers or meters, your favorite footballer runs on the pitch, how many assists they give in goal, or whether it's for return on investment to build a new factory or something. But we don't really use it to measure well-being and mental health, even though the academic instruments have been there for about the last 10 years or so to do that. So it was really trying to bring a different viewpoint, I guess, and use it as a starting point for a discussion. So, for example, it's November at the moment. So, as you know, I have a love-hate relationship with awareness months and days as well. I think if we did our job properly, we would be talking about mental health and well-being 365 days a year. But I'll take what I can get, and it helps raise awareness and helps companies in particular think, okay, what have we done in the last year to maybe move the needle a little bit? But for November, I mean, the three stats I love in particular are 40% of men have never spoken to anyone about their mental health or well-being. And that's by anyone, that's their best friend, their loved ones, their parents, their GP, even they internalize all of that emotion. 1 in 3 men would rather clean the house, their entire house, than visit a doctor. Actually, I probably was there at one point too. I was a little bit, when I was in my cave, I was subsequently diagnosed with sleep apnea, extreme sleep apnea, and now I have also type 2 diabetes. And I wonder if I had gone to the doctor earlier and not procrastinated, would that have changed things? But yeah, I mean, stats, we use them in every facet of our life. Why not use them to talk about mental health and well-being?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thank you for sharing also this story, Martin, because you not only work with that, but you have been there, so you know how it is. And when you mentioned that you decided to get help, what was the trigger?
So for me, I think there was a conversation I had with somebody. So I witnessed my mum being sectioned.
Yeah.
I was probably about 5, and being sectioned in the UK in the 1970s typically meant that you were put into some sort of psychiatric institution, often against your will, and force-fed pills for an indefinite period of time. And that was towards the end of the late 1970s. And I was in a conversation with someone, a psychotherapist or psychiatrist, some guy with lots of letters after his name, big brain.
Yeah.
And he told me that in the UK today, 140 people will be sectioned for mental health disorders. So that's approximately 45 years after my mum was sectioned. As a society, in some ways, we haven't moved forward. We're talking about mental health more than we've ever done before. But when you look at the impact on people's lives, and whether it's suicide, whether it's being sectioned, in some ways we've learned nothing at all. And I think that was that was horrifying and scary all at the same time. And I think it was that statistic or learning that, so that works out something like 50,000 people, if you look at it over a year. In Switzerland today, it's actually even worse. So if you look at the population sizes of the UK versus Switzerland, whilst it's 140 people in the UK, it's closer to 300 here in Switzerland today. But that's for mental and behavioural disorders. And I think it was the realization that this is still going on in what should be a very, we have pretty good living standards, etc. But, we have good access to healthcare for the most part. And yet this is going on under our noses. I think that was a huge shock for me.
Yeah, and even more when I hear that Switzerland has even higher ratios. It's perhaps somehow even counterintuitive, because I think of Switzerland as a country with very high standard of living. And in general, I would think, even if we don't talk about Switzerland, I would think that the more rich, the more advanced is a country, the more wealth, the better the well-being of the people. And what's your experience, Martin, on that?
Yeah, it's a rich country problem. It's not exclusive to Switzerland. You look at a lot of the economies that put a lot of, that are at the top of either the innovation table, the patents tables, etc. And they're all struggling because of the pressure being put on kids at such a young age for academic performance. Switzerland, along with Spain and Portugal, have some of the worst mental health in kids across Europe. And yeah, it's just, we're putting in such pressure on kids to perform academically and trying to give them pathways to go on to university, etc., that we're not allowing kids to be kids. And then you throw in social media into the mix.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that a lot of kids now are living, if you're living abroad, it's well documented that kids who come from expat families have worse mental health than that of domestics. Kids, throw in divorce, other family situations into the melting pot. Yeah, it's difficult for kids today. And there's another stat, which again is none of these in some way are painting a good picture, but 50% of all mental health disorders are present by the age of 14. So it might live there dormant, but because of the pressures that we're putting on kids from an academic perspective, social media is playing havoc with our prefrontal cortex, and we're making decisions based on emotions rather than fact. All of that, can be quite a difficult childhood. And I know, my situation was very different in some ways, but that PTSD came out only in the last 10 years or so for me, or a knowledge that I had PTSD as a result of witnessing what happened to my mum, and I didn't know my mum as a result of her mental health struggles. So, but it took me, I've been saying this, I've been doing a couple of presentations on men's mental health in particular during November. So it's a little bit easier to say it now, but I've been saying that, it's basically taken me 49 years, an ENTSA mental health first aid course, and quite a lot of therapy to be able to share that with you. But it feels good to talk about it as well. And it's liberating as well.
Yeah, and thank you, Martin, for sharing this, because one of the things is that, especially now you share the statistics, how is it that it's so challenging to talk about these things? First of all, talk about this issue, and second, for men, especially for men. What do you think there is behind that?
So mental health doesn't discriminate. Irrespective of gender, we all have the same struggles. I mean, men, it tends to be more terminology like substance abuse or PTSD, depression, anxiety, etc. But so on that hand, our struggles are the same, but it's the way that we're taught to deal with them.
Mm.
That's the difference. So, okay, I grew up with my dad and my stepmom. Um, and even today, my dad is 81. I try and give him a hug, and it feels like I'm hugging a block of ice. There's, it's, there's no, he doesn't lean in. It's kind of like, hugging just someone because you hug him because he's your father, but you don't feel that you get that lack of that tactile nature back. Um, but my dad's generation comes from even the word stigma for my dad. When I told him I was going into mental health,
Yeah.
we had a row about the use of the word stigma because for him that's a dirty word. Not even, and that's before we even get on talking about mental health. So certainly as a kid, if I was struggling, I hid behind "I'm fine," like a lot of men do today. Um, or when I was told to pull myself together, to keep a stiff upper lip, you'll get through it. You know, it's just a it's just a phase. It's just a thing.
Yeah.
So it's hard. For a long time, men have been told to, yeah, just to keep yourself upbeat and pull yourself together, and you'll pull through it. We're not taught to show any vulnerability or emotions. We kind of have this outdated ideas of masculinity that we can't show any vulnerability, we can't cry. Even hugging, so I love to give my male friends a hug, and sometimes you see people who are like, you can see in the corner of their eyes in the pub, especially, like, why are guys hugging? But for me, it's a wonderful expression of emotion. But for a lot of people, still, men, yeah, struggle with that because they've learned that from their parents, and it's been passed generational behavior. We are socialized a lot. I think a lot more than we ever acknowledge how much we've absorbed
Yeah.
from our folks,
Yeah. And
and that
when you say
makes
that,
it difficult.
absolutely, you're talking about the kids, and if I think about my own kids, for example, my daughter and my son, they give me the same hug. There is no difference in how my son gives hug and how my daughter. and 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 it's, yeah, there's something they can also teach us, no? So things that have no expectation, no conditioning, nothing. So I'm wondering, how can we allow them to express that, and at the same time show them that it's okay to express this thing, and it's part of life. It's not, you don't have
Yeah.
to hide it. You can be frustrated, you can be sad, you can be disappointed, many things. It's okay. How 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 can we do that? What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, it's a cliche. So we work with schools. We can measure mental health in schools for kids from grade 3 and upwards. That's 7, I guess. The mental health literacy of parents and also staff well-being.
Mhm.
But when it boils down to it, teaching kids that it's okay to not be okay is the best thing that you can do. And the sooner you can encourage a kid, whether it's in class or at home, to just stick his or her hand up and say, "I don't feel great today." And the sooner you can instill that value in
Yeah.
that child, the better they will be, the more resilient they will be in life, and knowing that it's okay. I mean, we've lived for so long where men believe, showing any sort of weakness is a chink in their armor, is a vulnerability. I've talked about it a lot on LinkedIn, and it feels sometimes like I'm like a broken record. But this phrase that, asking for help is a sign of strength and not a weakness. Um, but yet, even today, even in 2024, we need to keep saying it and keep saying it.
Yeah. And I would add also that we need to see them in others. So if we see someone that we respect or someone close to us do that, we say, okay, maybe it's happening also something similar to us on a different situation, but then we see that the person asking, and when I see someone asking for help, or he or she saying, I'm not feeling good today, I'm pissed off, or I'm disappointed at this, I don't think, oh, you are weak or what a bad person. So if someone says that to me, why should I fear that? Because, and at the same time, it's a way to show, I think, that we appreciate, we care for the other person. Because if I value our relationship, I will be more open to with you. I will trust you. So it's a sign of trust.
Yeah, and this is it. If anyone who's listening or watching this, if you think back to the last time someone came up to you and asked you for help, did you think less of them as a result of that?
On the contrary,
Absolutely not. If anything, they went up in your estimation.
exactly. Yeah,
So this judgment and stigma is living rent-free up here.
exactly.
And as men in particular, we're crap at putting our hand up. In the same time, when we see other people struggling as well, we want to come with solutions and answers, because that's how man was built. We
Yeah,
come, we
fix
make
it. Yeah,
fire and everything else. But actually, just saying to someone, look, I can see something's not right. How can I help? It cuts through all the need to be a subject matter expert on anything. It works both professionally or in personal life, and just showing someone that you care.
exactly.
Simple thing, but for a lot of guys, because we think we have to come with solutions, therefore we avoid the situation and we bury our head in the sand, and yeah, then that just becomes a vicious circle.
Absolutely. And this also reminds me on a different plane in coaching, you don't give solution. Absolutely never. It's not the goal of the coach to fix the problem. If there is a problem or whatever, the topic is to listen, to ask a question, and to connect with the person, to make them feel seen. And then each of us will come with our own solution and our own resources. And just having this space and being seen and being listened to, it's and it's not yet so common.
Yeah, the problem is I think we're all guilty of it. We all, when someone's talking, you're automatically thinking of a solution.
Yeah,
We need to, what's it, 80-20 rule of just listening 80% of the time. It's easier said than done. It does require a lot of practice and patience, even now.
yes,
But sometimes just taking a breath, taking a step back can help enormously.
absolutely. And this reminds me of something that now we are here, we're talking as if we know everything, and it's not, of course, like this. We are
God,
human.
no.
We have been all through this, and we will. And one thing that you said about this is reminding me of conversation with my wife when sometimes, and I also do it. Of course, it's not only my wife. And when my wife tells me something, I tend, and especially with my wife or with people who are very close to us, we jump to this solution mode. So when I catch myself, which sometimes I don't, I ask her, okay, are you telling me this because you want my advice, you want my opinion, or because you just want to share? And then most of the time she says, no, I just want to share with you. Okay. And that's it. So the more I do it, the more I get it that I don't need to give solutions. I just need to listen and maybe ask another question. And maybe when someday happens something or I see something, I say, okay, looks like you are something's going on. You want to talk about that? Oh, no, no, no. Okay, that's fine. But then I'm there if you want.
Yeah, just giving her the space.
Yes.
Happy wife, happy life
Yeah.
is a phrase we use a lot. But also adding, sometimes people won't answer when you ask them, how are you? We do this on do talk and listen sessions for men online with a great guy in the UK called Zane, who's a big strapping ex-copper New Zealand guy. And we always ask people at the beginning of the call, how are you? And we ask them to give them a number out of 10 of how they're feeling. So 1 being meh, bad day, 10, top of the world. But we always say you're not allowed to choose 7. It's the numerical equivalent of I'm fine.
Yeah.
And taking 7 off the table forces you to reflect on how you're really feeling. And sometimes just doing that, and then also asking really, how are you really doing? When someone asks fine, that's kind of the mask.
Yes.
And then you add really to it, and the mask slips, and they will give you, hopefully, a more honest answer.
Yeah. Thank you for that example, Martin. Now that you say this, I'm fine, it reminds me of the classic answer when we ask this at work. How are you doing? Oh, I'm great. I'm fine. And curious, in your experience, what's the connection with work? How all these things apply in the world of work?
There's still some debate, I think, on whether we should be talking about mental health and well-being at work.
Yeah.
Some people talk about, the fact that you should bring your whole self to work, and kind of what you see is what you get. And others think, there should be clear boundaries between my personal and professional life. I'm obviously biased, so I think that you can't, it's exhausting trying to mask what's going on in your life. And my life is relatively simple in the sense that we don't have kids. We live together, we have a furry friend. He requires going out 3 times a day. We don't have the pressures of caregiving for ill relatives, divorce, all these types of life events that sweep us up in midlife. And I struggle sometimes just trying to be me, because there's this belief that because you work in mental health that you always have your shit together, and which is a complete fallacy. Apologies for my French, but I wobble just as much as the next person. I'm much better now this year at understanding what is causing that wobble, and I have a lot more techniques for dealing with it. But you posted something recently about the Helsinki, was it a photographer or a cinematographer in
the bus, staying in the bus.
Yes. So hit this theory that all the buses leave Helsinki traveling the same route, and then at some point in time they will all diverge to go off to their destinations, and that actually when life gets tough you need to stay on the bus, I believe was the
Yes.
I'm paraphrasing a bit, probably butchering the poor guy's work, but the idea that you stay on the bus, you don't get off just because life is tough. And this time last year, I almost got off the bus many, many times, because it was my emotional roller coaster was exhausting. Mental health is a difficult subject anyway, irrespective of what's going on in life. But then doing it as your day job can be hard, especially when you're talking about things like suicide, with kids, self-harm, or anyone who has to go through that. So you do need tips and techniques to manage your emotions. I'm just much better at managing them this year, that's for sure. So your question was about work. We spend 90,000 hours of our life at work, approximately. Some people can probably mask throughout 5 days a week, and if they can, chapeau, hats off to them, great. But for everybody else who is impacted, but just a human, and life gets in the way. It's raw, it's real, shit happens, and that's going to impact your work. And they say that I think something like 70% of people are more impacted, their mental health is impacted more by their manager than by their doctor. And to me, that's all that says all you need to know about that. It's part of, again, psychological safety, being human, bringing your whole self to work, that sense of belonging. We do our best work when we have that cocoon, that safety net.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Otherwise, we're just, yeah, whistling in the wind.
Yeah, and also if we have a safe space or secure base, as George Colliser would call it, in our work, in our colleagues, if we have some struggle in our personal life, we can ask for help. We can be heard there. And again, when you talk about the managers, how important it is the role of a manager to create this safe space, to create this psychological safety, so to even to normalize these things. And when once I heard my own manager, one of the managers that I had, talking about his own struggles, I say, "Oh, okay," and it gives you permission also. And I also did it sometime. I say, okay, today I'm very stressed because X and Z happened, and I want you to know it because you will see that. And I cannot put the mask all the time. You will see that. And I prefer that you know it and you know that it's not about you, it's about me. It's about what happened this morning or yesterday. So please forgive me if I'm rude or if I say something out of my line, and this is my content. Of course, this does not give me permission to be rude. It's just letting the people know that I'm human and I have some issues that I have to work on. And then what happened? That people helped me, and also we had more trust after that.
It's an incredible um, facility. Well, facility is the wrong word, but it's incredible when you let your guard down and just share something about your life, whether it's you're struggling to conceive as a family and you're going through IVF, or you have a parent who has dementia, or someone who's in palliative care, final stages of life, a child who's neurodivergent. Um, it's part of what makes us human, and we can't be this robotic persona. Sorry, even all the time. We are hugely impacted what goes on outside of work.
Yeah,
Because I know
absolutely.
for you particularly, you have it with your son, and you've shared very openly about
Yeah.
his struggles with his neurodivergency. How has that been? Did you? How much of a struggle was it for you to come forward and share that with your colleagues?
Yeah. Thank you, Martin, for asking this. And actually, this is one of the examples in which I was actually, was like so much a surprise. And from one day to the other, you you lose in some way. You lose something. I lost the idea that I was going to have, let's say, a normal life. The expectation. You talk about the expectation, no? On kids. I had my expectations, and then my expectation was like, okay, they're not going to be. So you have to deal with that first. And when I dealt with it, when I started to deal with that, I said, okay, what am I going to do at work? Because I want to be present with my son. I want to give me the best possible care, the time, the attention, because now I know what's there, and I know that I can do something. At the same time, this will affect or will have some effect on my work. I want to be doing good work, but if I don't tell them, then I have again the mask. Oh, what are you doing? So I decided to just tell the people, all the team. I said, okay, we use one of our team meeting. I said, okay, I have something happen. My son has been diagnosed with autism, and for the next months, weeks, years, I will be very present. So I ask you to help me to manage this and to rearrange something so that we can still give our best. And actually, that the response of all the people in the team was the warmest possible. People reached out and said, "Oh, I have a friend who's doing this therapy or session. They offer the resources." So it was like, wow. I was surprised positively. Of course, I did not. I expected they will accept it. But what I didn't expect was such a warm and generous response. So if I can encourage someone who's maybe listening to this recording or now and has the same, don't hesitate, because this is one of the biggest gift that we can also make to our kids. And when we accept that, when we share this, at the same time we let go some of the expectations. So I'll say, okay, I said it. Now what can we do? What can we, and then you can move on. Because if not, again, when you put the mask, in some way, maybe you are denying, and oh, nothing is happening. And one of the things that's really very painful to me is when someone tells me of kids which is neurodivergent, just being diagnosed, or has some suspects of something going on, and the parents are not seeing that and acting like, oh, no, it's nothing, it's nothing. So painful to see that, because as you said, 14 years. No, you mentioned the statistic at 14, everything is set, and then of course you can work on that. But these are so important years.
Yeah, and it gets, well, not worse is the wrong word, but by the time we're 25, 75% of mental illnesses have their onset. So these formative years are so important. It's wonderful that you can get your son the support, the therapy, the help that he needs, but also you as a family need to get through it. Because 1 in 5 of us are neurodivergent. And it's not it used to be this thing, certainly in the 70s and 80s, that was something else. What's wrong with you? You know, we look back to Rain Man and things like this. And it was seen as something, you know, something's out of whack was kind of the language that was used. It just means our brains are wired slightly differently. Nothing more. But it's the perception still is, people still think of things like Dustin Hoffman and Rain Man rather than more, let's say, more positive outlook. But what great thing is we're seeing, well, great thing, is that a good way to say it? But thankfully more people like yourself are sharing, and that helps to normalize the conversation, and that's the only way as a society we can move forward, and people to realize that we're not alone. And I'm sure with your colleagues there was probably someone there who was also in the same boat, and then you can also share your learnings. This worked for me, this didn't work for me, but people are just knowing they're not alone is a huge comfort factor in whatever your struggle is.
Absolutely. And now that you say that, I'm curious, and the time flies, it's already past half. Let's check the chat if we have some comments or question. And we invite you again, if you have any, put them in the chat and we can discuss. Let's see. Okay, here. Okay, let me. Oh. Hello. Okay, I see a few comments. Let's go to the beginning here. Here. Hi, Rachel. Hi, Martin. Hi, Heather. Claire. Hi, Maria. Gopi-chan. Hi. Okay, I see here some comments which are actually not related to the conversation. Yeah. But then I see having compassion and understanding is important so FIDE can open up. Thank you, Rachel. That's. I'm trying to see, because we have a lot of comments and actually not all of them are related. I see. Yeah, that's so powerful. Okay, Miguel. Miguel is talking about schools, and it needs to start at school age until we have the generation who is there today, is entering the workforce. we need to help people to do so in the workforce, which I see is the school for adults. You want to add something on this, Martin?
Can you repeat the last bit? I didn't
Yeah,
hear.
Miguel is talking about we need to start a school,
Mm.
and he said, okay, but at the same time, if we don't start a school, workforce is the school for adults.
Yeah, I think we're seeing certainly Gen Z, as we call them now, they're coming into the workforce and they're starting to make demands that our generation certainly almost push back on and think no, but actually they are starting to be much more aware of their mental health and well-being and what works for them and what doesn't. Whether it's hybrid working, the ability to go to the gym at 11 o'clock, people are demanding flexibility from their employer and demanding that their employers give them a work-life balance, for sure. But I mean, I think from a school perspective, I think schools are trying really hard to do the right thing, but it's so difficult. They got it's not just education anymore. And when they went through the pandemic, teachers having to do spit tests as well as keep the kids' grades on track and stuff like this, it's tough. But even like I've been talking to a school, I'm not going to narrow down the geography because it will try and preserve some confidentiality. But there was a girl who hung herself in a dormitory of a boarding school over Easter. And you think that that will be the trigger for the school to start investing in mental health and well-being? And the school was like, they weren't sure. They didn't want to open Pandora's box. And so it got pushed out to the next academic year. So even when you have a life event as tragic as that, unfortunately, schools, I mean, they're between a rock and a hard place, for sure. And parents in particular, some parents, as you touched upon, don't want to share their experiences, maybe because they had a bad experience of school as well themselves, or they had been brought up to think, a child should be seen and not heard, and these types of phrases that certainly was kind of rammed into me, as a kid. But the sooner we can let children and acknowledge their emotions, and we touched on this earlier, but giving them the vehicle to do that, school is no longer about academic success. That shouldn't be the benchmark of a child's success anymore. How well-rounded, how empathetic, how much compassion do they have, how much resilience, they should all be elements which are just as important, if not more, in their curiosity, their emotional intelligence. Yeah, there's a great quote by Daniel Goleman, the father of emotional intelligence. And he says that 20% of our success in life is down to our IQ. And 80% is down to our emotional intelligence. And sometimes we're a bit obsessed as a society with letters after our name, coaching certificates for whatever, you name it. And LinkedIn doesn't help either because it kind of encourages you to say, I've just got this qualification, whatever. And that's great for people because I believe in continuous learning. But, for a kid to get to 16, 18, going on to university, there's so much pressure on them today. We have to do better. There has to be a better way.
Yeah, and especially when things go so fast, who knows if with what you're studying and you're getting these grades will be useful in 4 years or and one in 20. No one knows. So cannot agree more that these life skills that we are teaching to the kids are much more important than the hard. And it doesn't mean that it's not important, but as you said, the curiosity, how to problem solve, how to deal with your emotion, how to handle frustration, so important. And being a father of a neurodivergent kid, and probably I'm the same as my kid, and how important it is to manage your frustration and know that it will pass. But if you don't, you can get stuck. So this is so important. And and I'm very optimistic at the same time, because I see in the school of my kids that they are starting to do this. They are starting to talk about these things, and we ask them and we send comments to the teachers about what we did in the weekend. How was when my son Luca? How was Valentina? And we have this kind of conversation. So I'm very much optimist. At the same time, I know that things go slow, but I see some rays of sun into that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think also the kids can only be given so much if the teachers are in a good place. You know, if the teachers are struggling, let's say if they're a single parent, for example, you know, it puts a whole lot of
Yeah.
unique pressures on them. And they have to, you know, you're asking them to bring almost the burden of responsibility for a teacher, much harder just to say, you know, I'm just going to stay in bed today. You know, you can't, well, clearly you can do that, but they don't, you know, because their sense of responsibility is so much higher. But if the teachers aren't in a good place, if they're struggling with whatever life is throwing at them, then they can't give the kids the best, their full attention. So it's very much, so, you know, the Australians do. We can learn so much from the Australians for mental health and well-being, but they have this phrase about they call whole school well-being. So it's looking at the mental health literacy of parents, staff well-being, and that of the kids. And if you've got all of that working in harmony, having transparency around conversations about mental health and well-being, open Pandora's box, don't hide anything, then as a school and an institution, that's really setting yourself up for success.
Absolutely. Thank you. Let's see if we have more questions. Listening. Thank you. Active listening. Yeah, we talk about that. Thank you, Anisha. Yeah, Miguel is talking about how are you doing? Again, the question. Thank you, Miguel. Okay, and actually, I have one question about the questions, which is, of course, this is a very public place. We are live. We are on LinkedIn, and what usually happens when you open in your session, in your conversation, when you open up the Q&A space? What's your experience with these topics that are so personal, so deep, and so human? That we all experience that.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I've just done 2 sessions for corporates here in Switzerland during November. I won't name them, but 2 big, well, one of the top 4 consultancy firms in the world, another big financial services company, 2/3 of their employees are men. And we did 2 sessions for them on men's mental health. We created, it was on Zoom because it was all of their locations around the world. Had the opportunity to dial in. And at the very beginning, I put my email address on the screen saying, if you're not sure about sticking your head above the parapet, email me. And I'll read your question out when we come to the Q&A, but I won't name you. I'll just mention your question, hopefully answer it, and then when the session is over, I'll delete it. And after about 40 minutes, we came to the Q&A. For the financial services company, and we had over 100 people online, and not one person put a question in the chat. I looked at my phone, I picked my phone up, scrolled to my email. My email was lighting up.
Wow!
And it wasn't just short questions. You know, someone was asking me about how do they find their purpose. Saying, you know, I'm 30. This is my particular situation in life. How do I find my purpose? So some really meaty questions that you almost struggle to answer in such a short space of time. But I was very pleased with that because somehow we created that safe space for them to ask. But even in that session, there were only guys. The company did very well to say this is a space for men only, which is very rare in this, when we all try to be so inclusive today. Even then, when they knowing that it's just other men on the call, no one wanted to put their head above the parapet. And that is the stigma that we're facing around men's mental health today. We're talking about it more than we've ever done before, but clearly for a lot of guys, those who don't want to clean the house or would rather change a flat tire on their car, which I think is 1 in 4, would rather change a flat tire than go to the doctor. We've still got a long way to go. But we have, as we've talked about this, a friend and I, Carl, are doing a roadshow for Movember. We're going around a few Swiss cities doing fireside chats on men's mental health. And we say, if we can just help one person during all of our sessions, during all of our conversations, if we can just help one person who might be struggling or at the very worst, thinking of stepping off into the abyss, then it'll all be worth it. And this is why conversations like this are so important. Just talking about it, conversation, camaraderie, and even if it's one conversation at a time, we'll get there. But it's going to take time, and it needs a lot of patience.
And absolutely. And talking about patience and time and future, perhaps, I'm curious, what's the thing that at this moment excites you the most?
I mean, more. So we started out at OT measuring well-being in schools, and then we kind of pivoted a little bit into staff well-being, because it doesn't matter whether you work in a school or a chocolate factory. The instruments to measure psychosocial risks are all the same, irrespective of the work environment. And there's a lot of interest from people, but I would say people are interested but not committed. So projects were coming in, but not big bang, holistic, systemic change. And I love to talk about topics that society still considers to be taboo. So, I talk about, I'm much more open now about sharing my mum's struggles, as we talked about. But one of those things that, one of those topics that is hugely taboo in 2024 is menopause. So menopause is a stage of life that is inevitable for over half the global population. And yet as a society, we don't talk about it. So we've just done, for the second year running, we've just concluded Switzerland's largest study on the impact of menopause in the workplace. And I think one of the things that I'm most interested in is, as on the back of that research, both quantitative and qualitative, a lot of people are saying, I want to learn more about this in the workplace. And if the leadership teams will have some awareness or understanding, then maybe there can be more empathy for the topic. And so we're just starting from January, February, going to start doing menopause awareness sessions just for men. Because that way we can bring much more awareness to the topic. We can create a safe space where they can ask the silly questions. I did a straw poll over the summer of 10 friends. Not one of them could give me a decent answer on what menopause meant or how long it lasts. I won't put you on the spot.
I would be one of them.
This. So
I would be one of them, of course. And yeah, absolutely. And that's so important. Now we are talking about this, and you just brought this topic, and absolutely,
So,
I'm the living proof, and I will check it. Of course, I'm curious about them now. And yes, half of the people will happen. We have
it's
to
an
know.
inevitable stage of life, but
Yes.
we talk about it like it's something bad, like
Yeah.
women their well-being or their health is declining, but it's the language we use around it's also wrong. So I've somehow got myself, I used to love drawing Venn diagrams as a kid. I was crap at maths, but I remember Venn diagrams, and somehow I've got myself into this position where I'm most of my conversations today are around men's mental health and menopause. So two very distinct, separate topics, but actually most of the demand or
Yes.
conversations with companies are all going down that road right now. So I'm super excited to see where that goes. And that's not something, if you said to me even 18 months ago, 2 years ago, as a man, you'll be talking about menopause and
Yeah.
doing, giving keynotes at summits on well-being for women's
Yes.
well-being on the topic. That's fascinating and scary in equal measures because I'm not a subject matter expert at all. But I guess if you've done 2 studies on the topic, I know probably more than your average guy.
Yeah. And you
And if I can,
mentioned one thing.
yeah.
Just think one thing that popped in my mind is in the previous conversation we talked about the allies, and you have a lot of allies which are female, and now male can also be allies to this because we can be empathetic. We have to know what's happening on the other side. And as a man, I am a father. My wife. I want to know. So I want to be able to have this empathy, have this conversation. It's so important. Thank you.
No, and if we can, those team dynamics are so important. You talk about sharing up around your son's
Yes.
struggles with neurodivergency. Just being able to for men to have more awareness about the topic. How for some women, they will get very few symptoms and they'll be able to sail relatively through unhindered. But for the vast majority of women out there, the symptoms are as unique as our fingerprints. And most women will last between 7 to 15 years. That's a hell of a phase of life
Absolutely.
with no empathy or awareness from the male colleagues, husbands, partners. So hopefully we can make guys better in the workplace, but also the learnings that we'll give them will also hopefully feed through and to make them better husbands, partners at home as well.
Absolutely. Time flies, Martin. I have two more questions. The
Mhm.
first one, if someone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way?
LinkedIn. I have a love-hate relationship with social media, but in fact, even it's hard for my mental health. So I can only just about keep a conversation going on LinkedIn before I can't do TikTok or Instagram or anywhere like that. So LinkedIn, whack in my name into LinkedIn and send me a connection request. Probably the easiest way. Thank you.
Great. And of course, we will put everything, all the links and everything else in the chat and in the notes. And before we wrap up, I have one more question, which is, what would you like to see more and less in the world if you could choose?
It's a loaded question. I could go on for
Yeah.
that for a lot. I would like to see more. Maybe it's a little bit of a heavy topic to end on, but I'd like to see more empathy for 2 things: domestic abuse
Mm.
and suicide. So we've been talking for about an hour now. During this, a male 65 males will have died by suicide during the time that we've been talking. Someone dies by suicide somewhere in the world, irrespective of age or gender, every 40 seconds. It's hundreds of thousands of people. And yet we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Domestic abuse, 1 in 3 employees will be victims of domestic abuse. And we think of domestic abuse as physical altercations, but it can be financial, coercive. It's not just,
Yes.
for want of a better phrase, black eyes and beatings. And when it boils down to it, if you think about the responsibility a corporate has and what a corporate can do in the well-being and mental health space, sure, you can give so many things on mental health and well-being, but for me, giving employees a safe space who are victims of domestic abuse has to be the pinnacle of well-being. That's got to be the ultimate thing that you can offer. And some companies do that really well. Vodafone, in particular, are are probably the world leaders on that. They have fantastic policies. And if you are at risk, they will get you into a safe space. They will get you legal help, etc. It's phenomenal service. You know, we talk about a lot about, we're sometimes quite flippant about companies giving yoga and free fruit to try and move the needle on well-being. But if you really want to do something, have a policy on domestic abuse. For me, that is trumps absolutely everything.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. It was so good to have this conversation. I also am intrigued by some of the things that you share with me. I will definitely look more into it. And you are such an example of what we're discussing, what sharing, being open, and normalizing things and reducing all this, the stigma and the expectation that we have to be like this mask. So thank you so much. Thank you for the people who are also have this wonderful question and contributed to the conversation. And I hope, as you said, that it's not necessary to talk about these things. At the same time, we will definitely do more.
Yeah, thank you, Roberto. Thank you for creating the space to have this conversation. I wish and hope other people follow your lead.
Thank you, Martin. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Let's see if we are still live.